So many times we say that desire is what is preventing us from achieving what we want. But is it not true that desire is also driving us towards that? So is desire the good guy or the bad guy at some level?
Both. Desire for what is the question. Desire for personal wealth, name, fame, etc., comes in the way of your progress. So if you substitute that with the desire for the higher, then with reference to anything lower than that, you are objective, you're calm.
What makes something higher or lower? A desire. When you move from being, let's say, selfish towards being unselfish, there is always a fear of what will happen to my interests, what will happen to me, right? Isn't that a feeling that we all experience when we're doing this?
Yes, but it depends on how strong your desire is for the higher. Like, say, a person like Sachin Tendulkar never thought about what will happen to me. At that time, there was no money in cricket. And the credit goes to his parents that they didn't tell him that there's no money in cricket, why don't you do business? So if it's very powerful, you don't even think of yourself. You're just totally dedicated there. But if that fear comes, then you have to look at others who have done it and then learn a little bit of philosophy from the Bhagavad Gita and understand that nobody who has worked for a higher cause has suffered. Whereas people who work for a selfish cause may or may not succeed.
True.
That's why in the Bhagavad Gita it says,
Jayaji, you mentioned on the way here that we have a spiritual retreat coming up in Lonavala near Mumbai very soon on the 28th and 29th of March. Is that right?
that's right.
So could you tell us a little more about that?
Yes, you see, just as a ship needs dry docking once in a while, we also need time to reflect, press the pause button, and think a little about what do we want from life? Where are we going? Are we on the right track or have we gone off at a tangent? If so, how do we course correct? And all this need not be a boring exercise. In fact, spiritual learning or study itself is associated with boredom. So we are giving people an opportunity to do all this and connect with the ancient wisdom of our culture in an environment of fun, laughter, cheer, togetherness, meeting and connecting with people who are different from you maybe, and in an environment which is conducive for this kind of endeavor. So it is specifically designed for young adults, meaning between the ages of 18 and 25. Younger will do also. And it's a weekend course. So you don't have to take time off from work or anything. And I think it's important that all of us give ourselves this time to switch off from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, to kind of take stock of the situation of our lives. So this is it.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way to kind of plug into your own spiritual side.
Yeah, absolutely. The point is, all of us have this spiritual yearning.
Exactly.
But we never give it a chance.
Yeah. So if you're keen on signing up for the retreat, you can WhatsApp us or write email to us. You can also check the description of the video, and we'd be happy to take it from there.
And the website vedantavision.org will have more information on it.
Yeah, you can also check out the website. Jayaji, coming back to today's show now, we're a few days away from Gudi Padwa or Ugadi or Vaisakhi, as it's known in different parts of the country. But could you throw some light? Of course, we know what happens at the festival. But could you throw some light on the spiritual significance of the festival?
Yes, it is a spring festival. It celebrates the coming of spring. And also, the significance seems to be that it was a celebration of Rama's coronation after the 14 years of Vanvas. So, it's a kind of a renewal, a rejuvenation of our personality from the dark winter of our life, and that we're looking forward to positivity, to growth, and that we are committing ourselves to it. Also, what is significant is that the prasad that is given at Gudi Padwa or Yugadi is a mix of neem leaves and jaggery, which denotes that life is a mix of pairs of opposites. You can never escape the negatives of life. But if you learn the technique of living, you take it in your stride, everything becomes joyful. In fact, just the mix of the two lends value to life itself, if you know how to deal with it. So it's a kind of commitment to positivity, to going back to the enthusiasm and excitement that we felt as kids, which we seem to have lost by the time we get to adulthood. So that is Gudi Padwa.
Yeah, and I think it's important in life for us to accept the good and the bad with grace, right? Otherwise, sometimes we get thrown off by anything bad or negative that happens, and we get like unnecessarily, maybe, overexcited with something positive that may happen. But somewhere there needs to be like a balance uh, when you're faced with either of the two, right? And
Yes.
isn't and in a sense, the world itself is the definition of the world is that it's a pair of opposites, right?
I heard Sachin Tendulkar say recently that he himself has failed many times in life. There are times when he got out for a duck. But the thing is to recover quickly from it, learn from your failures, and move on, plod on. And that is the difference between a success and a failure. A failure is one who fails and remains there.
True.
So this is part of life.
When we hoist so I did a bit of research where they say that the hoisting of the Gudi that we do on Gudi Padwa is kind of symbolizes um, standing up for a spiritual value that means something to you, keeping that in your consciousness, keeping that in your memory for the coming season, for the coming year, and working on that. Is that something that is applicable? You think is
Yes,
important?
could be. It's also a way of like keeping your antenna alert for intake of positivity
Yep.
and a celebration.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are three questions that I think we can ask ourselves on the festival of Gudi Padwa or Yugadi. One is what mental habit um, can I let go of? What negative mental habit can I let go of this year? The second is what value do I want to raise in myself? What positive value do I want to raise or hoist in myself, um, like a goodie within me? And the third thing is to accept. Can I learn to accept the bitterness and sweetness of life with grace? Um, so I think these are the three kind of questions that we can ask ourselves on this festival. Mm, shall we move on to the verses of the Gita now?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll begin with the invocation.
ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
We're now in chapter 2, and we're going to look at verses 48 and 50. In verse 48, Lord Krishna says, O Dhananjaya, be established in yoga, perform actions abandoning attachment, and be equal to success and failure. Equality is known as yoga. That's 48. And in verse 50, he says, one endowed with wisdom abandons both virtue and vice. Therefore, be absorbed in yoga. Yoga is proficiency in action.
Yes, these two verses are very important because they convey a very important aspect of life, that at all times your mind must be serene, calm. Only then can you do anything meaningful. Only then will your intellect be alert and sharp, and naturally your actions will be brilliant, you'll be successful. So now if you go back into our lives, the 48th verse says, Samatvam yoga uchyate. Equanimity of mind is yoga. So whenever we are equanimous, we are disinclined to activity. Like on a Sunday morning, if anyone suggests activity, you get irritated. That is not yoga. That is tamas. So he follows it up in verse 50 by saying, proficiency of action is yoga. And when the two go together, then you can achieve perfection. So how do you get the mind calm? When you're free of selfish desires. Selfishness itself creates agitation. Correct. And you're dedicated to something higher. Now, in this case, to spiritual development or realization. Then your mind is calm because you don't want anything in the world. Your intellect is sharp, naturally sharp. And your actions are brilliant. So this is stark in sport. So when a batsman is at 99 and he's facing the bowler, it's very difficult for his mind to be in the present. So it goes back into the past. How many times I've come up to my 90s and failed? Will I get this century or not is very important for me. Then he gets out. But if he, like Gavaskar used to say, I never look at the scoreboard. And that is how he hit 34 centuries, broke the record. But even when you look at the scoreboard, if you discipline your mind, the intellect keeps the mind on the present and does not allow it to go to the past or future, then you get it.
Like, I find it difficult sometimes when we're in the heat of action or heat of the moment, to maintain a calm disposition. It becomes a challenge because, like, you're so involved in the situation. You're at an interview, a crucial job interview, or a key business meeting that could make, at some level, it could make or break your business. How do you maintain that equanimity in those situations?
See, it's in any situation, whether it's sport or business or politics. If you can be calm only when you have no value for the result. When you are dedicated, like let's say a sports person. Now the World Cup in football is coming up. If a player says that I am dedicating my action to my country, and it's not about personal achievements, then he just goes out there and plays, he enjoys it. Then he's free from tension or stress or anxiety. All this comes only when you want something. You're desperate for the result. So in Vedanta we say, you chase after a thing, it eludes your grasp. Turn your back on it and it comes to you. Turn your back means just enjoy it. Do the best that you can. And then your mind will be in the present. You play beautifully. or you'll perform beautifully, and the result will automatically come to you.
So many times we say that desire is what is preventing us from achieving what we want. But is it not true that desire is also driving us towards that? So is desire the good guy or the bad guy at some level?
Both. Desire for what is the question. Desire for personal wealth, name, fame, etc., comes in the way of your progress. But desire, so if you substitute that with the desire for the higher, then with reference to anything lower than that, you are objective, you're calm.
What makes something higher or lower? A desire.
Lower is something selfish, higher is something unselfish that encompasses more people within
Okay.
the scope of your desire.
Okay.
Like you can desire a promotion, and therefore you're acting so that your performance is good and you're promoted. Or you can act for the company, that you want your company to be the best in India, best in the world maybe. Or you're just doing it for spiritual development. That I don't want any of this. I only want spiritual evolution. But as long as I am at this level, I need to act. So what will I do? Whatever my field is, I do it to the best of my ability. Like Eric Liddell was a sports person, athlete. His philosophy was, God made me to run and I will run for God. Very simple. Then you will be absolutely calm. No disturbance whatsoever. Anything between total selfishness and that will have some element of agitation.
How do we as spiritual seekers, let's say that I am selfish today, how do I develop a sense of unselfishness or selflessness from where I am today?
Yes, just as in business, you look at your present turnover or performance and then add maybe 15%, 20%, so that it's doable with effort. Similarly, in the spiritual field, if you're working only for yourself, then you say, at least I should work for my husband, wife, children, or the larger family. And if I'm already working for the larger family, then the community, the country. So somewhere you get your inspiration. Something connects with you and you say, wow, this is good. This is something that I should be doing. That becomes your higher goal. And then as you proceed towards it, your vision itself expands further. Then you say, why should I work only for my community? Why not the whole country? Why not the whole of humanity? And then you go beyond to the transcendental.
When you move from being, let's say, selfish towards being unselfish, there is always a fear of what will happen to my interests, what will happen to me, right? Isn't that like a feeling that we all experience when we're doing this?
Yes, but it depends on how strong your desire is for the higher. Like, say, a person like Sachin Tendulkar never thought about what will happen to me. At that time, there was no money in cricket. And the credit goes to his parents that they didn't tell him, they must not have told him, that there's no money in cricket, why don't you do business? So if it's very powerful, you don't even think of yourself. You're just totally dedicated there. But if that fear comes, then you have to look at others who have done it. And then learn a little bit of philosophy from the Bhagavad Gita and understand that nobody who has worked for a higher cause has suffered. Whereas people who work for a selfish cause may or may not succeed.
True.
That's why in the Bhagavad Gita it says there is, in various instances, he says, there is no loss in this undertaking.
On the spiritual
In
path.
the spiritual path.
There's in verse 50, the last line, it says yoga is proficiency in action. So what does that mean in our lives?
Yeah, yoga karmasu kaushalam is proficiency in action. See, as long as your mind is agitated, you can't think straight and your action will naturally be flawed. But when your mind is calm, the samatvam yoga uchyate, then your your mind is calm, your thinking is sharp, nothing comes between you and perfection in action. So it comes naturally. You don't even know it. So this is how a tennis player plays impossible shots and wins. This is how a musician comes up with excellence. This is how all of us can come up with perfection. So it has nothing to do with having a high IQ or qualifications or money. It just has to do with your focus. And that is why they say every human being is capable of perfection, which is so encouraging.
Yeah. Because I think oftentimes in the world, as a student or at the workplace, we all get kind of pigeonholed into certain characters traits, but it's not necessarily the case, because you can actually be and become whoever it is that you want to be, right?
Yes.
At some level.
Not just that, our performance or our value is judged by the wrong things, like academic excellence.
Right.
Now you take a look at people who have truly creative and outstanding personalities. They were never good in academics because you can't make a creative person say, you have to learn this as is and vomit it out in an exam paper.
Yeah.
So the best of people are outliers in a way.
Yeah.
But while they're in school, and like Einstein was branded as a backward person, mentally retarded, and he won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
So if we understand that when we're dealing with children, we understand I have a creative child and that child will never excel academically. That must be an understanding. So similarly with us, we must understand our own nature, where we fit in, and then focus on just coming up with perfect action in whatever it is that we're doing.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to remember is spirituality is not something that will restrict us, but it's actually the opposite, where it will empower us to do whatever it is that we wish to achieve.
It actually liberates us.
Yep.
Because then you're not looking for external validation.
Exactly. I think we're edging towards the first part of the first half of chapter 2, and we'll now look at verses 51, 52, and 53. So now in verse 51, Lord Krishna says, endowed with wisdom, abandoning the fruit, the wise get freed from the bondage of birth and go to the state of no sorrow. 52, when your understanding transcends the mass of delusion, you will go to the state of total indifference to that which is heard and that yet to be heard. And in 53, he says, bewildered by sound, when your intellect remains unmoving and fixed in meditation, then you will obtain yoga.
This is a beautiful presentation of the drama of realization. So, towards the end of your spiritual life, he says, Manishinaha means the wise. Switch off from worldly attractions because they have access to the higher knowledge. So, in the world, there are two paths: bhoga, which we are all familiar with, indulgence in worldly attractions and things like that, and yoga, which is the happiness that you get from internal pursuit. Now, the wise are those who are established in the higher. So, they don't have, nothing in the world attracts them. Then what will they do? They get liberated from the pairs of opposites in the world. The world no longer affects them. you get freedom from the bondage of birth. So what causes birth is desire, vasana.
Right.
So here is a person who has freed himself from all desires. Now, when you accept the desire for realization, so there are three things that motivate such a person. He's renounced from the world. He has a very strong desire to get to realization. He has a little bit of desire to repay the guru who has helped him so much on his path, and generally to do service to the world. So that little bit is there, but that'll go. So he is assured that he will have no more birth. And the 52 then says that he is free from the mass of delusion. So what is this mass of delusion? We all are deluded because we have a desire for worldly satisfaction. So our body is making demands. So you go out into the world for sensual pleasures. The mind seeks emotional fulfillment. So that is another thing altogether. I mean, it can hold you for many lives. And intellectual pleasures. So too, here is a person who has freed himself from this delusion that the world can offer me happiness. And then he says something interesting, that you become indifferent to what has been heard and what is yet to be heard. So he's talking about meditation. Now, what is meditation? Meditation is the art of focusing the mind on one thought to the exclusion of all other thoughts under intellectual supervision. This intellectual supervision is the most important thing. Otherwise, a guy who's madly in love is thinking of his lover all the time. That's not meditation because it's not under intellectual supervision. So when you're completely focused there, you're in deep meditation, your mind is pliable. So the intellect says, stay here, and it stays. It does not think of the past. It doesn't think of the future. And at that state, you're ready to take off into realization. And in verse 53, he gives the drama of realization. Where now as you meditate, and this is not just once, for you to be able to come to this state, it takes many, many lives. Because if you try and meditate now, you'll find that the mind goes. The nature of the mind is asthira and chanchala. That's why he says in the last verse, the intellect unmoving and steady. Because there are two movements. One is from one place to the other is at a place the mind oscillates. So you're free from both. The mind is chanting a mantra. When you're deep in meditation, you stop the chant. When you stop the chant, what happens? Thought flow is stopped. And that was your last thought. So mind means thoughts. So without thought, mind is extinct. Intellect, whose job is to discriminate between two things. That's why he uses the word bewildered. The intellect is perplexed because it's got only one thing, silence.
No duality anymore.
There's no duality. It's stuck in that silence. And that is all that human effort can do. You can only get up to that state. And that last thought will vanish by itself. So this is beautifully portrayed in Krishna's life as Krishna is described as Makhan Chor. So this procedure of getting butter is the same procedure that you follow with the mind. So you warm the milk, make it lukewarm, and introduce a little bit of culture, the dahi in it, curd in it. And then you leave it. After a few hours, the fluid milk becomes solid curd. And if it's really made well, even if you turn the dish upside down, it doesn't fall. Then you churn. Churn clockwise, anti-clockwise. And within a matter of minutes, if you do it properly, pure white butter comes to the surface. This butter, Krishna takes away. So many people criticize us, what are you worshipping a guy who steals? but they don't understand the philosophy behind it. So the mind, which is like the milk, restless, running all over the place, that has to be made lukewarm, means you must have enough experiences of the world. You can't be a total novice. Not too hot, you're not partying every night. Not too cold, where you have no experience. Just right. And you introduce a little bit of spiritual knowledge in it, in that mind. And then leave it. Leave it means allow the mind to reflect, think, weigh the pros and cons, apply it in life. And then that mind, which is restless, becomes absolutely steady. And when you churn that mind, which is assertion of reality, negation of the unreal, pure white sattva, this sattvic element comes to the surface. Beyond that, a human being can't do anything. So it goes by itself. Meaning it's so refined and so pure that it disappears by itself.
I think it's really fascinating, and theoretically it's nice from where we are to aspire to something that is that is kind of the product of many lifetimes realization. But can you bring it down to a more relative level to where we are right now, which is where traffic and exams and tough colleagues, because realization seems a bridge too far for me definitely right now. So how can we bring this down to where our lives are?
Yeah. So the starting point should be, first of all, bring your intellect in place. Let your life be guided by the intellect and not by the whims and fancies of the mind. So there is some sense in what you're doing. And also the mental agitations go down. So the first verse, 51st, said, you will be free from sorrow. All the sorrow that we are experiencing now is because of wrong concepts and therefore wrong attachments. And with a little bit of knowledge, all that goes. At least you're calm enough to live life properly. Yeah. Then you fix a higher goal. Identify your field of pursuit and fix a higher goal. And then you will be indifferent to what is happening at the lower level. Like some people may criticize you, what is he doing? Some people may praise you. And it doesn't matter to you because you're not doing it for personal glory. You're doing it for a higher cause. So immediately you become kind of objective in life. And then when you're totally focused on the goal, you live in the present. And that gives you tremendous happiness. Every moment, if you're in the present, you relish that moment. You are happy in that moment. You're enthusiastic. You're excited in life. And that's all you need. So up to here, it's very doable for every one of us.
Yeah. One of the things that I kind of struggle with sometimes is we keep on harping about the importance of the intellect, right? But what of spontaneity? Right, there's a beauty of spontaneity in life. So doesn't the intellect kind of, if I'm filtering every thought through the intellect, it feels like very stilted, very is it the right thing to do? A friend calls me up and says, you know what, let's step out for dinner, or let's step out for lunch, or whatever it is, or let's go play a game of badminton, something like that. Do I need to run everything through the intellect? I mean, or let's just go out for a drive. We and those experiences have led to so many happy memories in life, right?
Yeah.
So what is, why intellect all the time?
Why intellect? The answer is very simple, because the mind has no sense of direction or dimension. The mind can want anything.
Yeah, fair.
Right? So the importance of the intellect is there. But intellectual supervision does not mean lack of spontaneity. Let's take an example. When you first learned driving, you started sweating when you were in traffic because you had to think of every move. Which gear do I put the car in? Whether I press the accelerator or the clutch? How far should I be from the car in front of me? What speed must I drive at? All of this is a conscious intellectual exercise. Today, when you drive, it is effortless. What's the difference?
Practice.
It's not that there is no intellect here. It's that continuously when you exercise the intellect, it becomes second nature to you. So much so that you not only become a good driver, you know what the guy in front is going to do even with no indication whatsoever.
Right.
Because in India, it's so indisciplined, the traffic. How does this come? This comes because of continuous intellectual application. So in the beginning, it may seem a bit strained, but over time, it becomes effortless. So what has happened is the intellect gives you sets parameters within which you don't need to consult the intellect.
Right.
Right? It's like the income tax department or immigration or customs. Up to a certain level, they allow you can do what you like. But they focus on the big guys.
Or even a parent-child relationship.
Yes.
As long as you're not doing anything to harm yourself, or the parent generally gives you that freedom to explore and make mistakes.
Should.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the parent gives complete freedom to the child within certain parameters. But when the child goes to the window and is leaning out of the window, that's a strict no-no.
Yeah.
You know? So, similarly, within ourselves, the intellect is like the parent. So, in fact, what happens is you become more spontaneous because you know it has already been scanned by the intellect. And there is no guilt. Like you make less mistakes. And even if you make a mistake, you know you'll live through it. But if you're not using the intellect, then you're constantly making mistakes. And then you say, if only I knew this, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are life-threatening decisions that we take in life without understanding the consequences. And then you have to suffer all your life.
Yeah. I get it. I mean, I think like just sometimes it sounds like, we say intellect all the time, and it feels like, what's the fun of it if I'm analyzing every situation? But I get what you're saying, because the parallel that you've drawn with driving, I think it makes sense then, because then you're not thinking about every single movement of yours. There's a certain rhythm, there's a certain flow.
And confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
And the more confidence you have, the faster you can drive.
Yep.
Similarly, in life, the more the intellectual application, the more you can take risks in life.
Yeah. Informed decisions, informed risks.
Yes.
Where you know what the downside is, you know how much downside there is, you know what the benefits are. So yeah, it makes sense. Just as a layperson, sometimes you feel like... I think with that, we're coming towards the end of today's episode. Are there some key takeaways that you'd like to leave us with today?
So the first thing we saw was the importance of a calm mind. Samatvam yoga uchyate. This samam is harped upon by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita throughout. And when the mind is calm, your thinking is clear, your action is perfect. And that everyone in the world, every human being has access to perfection. Then we saw this sequence of thought leading to realization, the drama of realization. It starts with Manishinaha, the wise, have risen above worldly attractions. So I think that is the first step to spiritual evolution, where you understand the futility of life. Because what are we...
You mean material pursuits?
Yeah, when you understand the futility of worldly attractions.
Yeah.
Now take us. How much time, effort, money, and our minds are engaged with just indulgence?
Almost 100%.
Exactly. So what is the return on it? Zero. And then you are in the grip of EMIs. Every young person, yesterday I was listening to someone who said 40% of your income just goes in paying EMIs. That's a terrible thing to be caught up with. And then it doesn't make allowances for illness, for, God forbid, death. Then what are you leaving behind to your heirs? Debts, EMIs to be paid. So, and then you can't extricate yourself from this because you're constantly looking at everyone is going on a fancy vacation, so I must go. Everyone has a luxury car, so I must have it. Everyone spends money on expensive brands, so I must do it. And that becomes non-negotiable. So the way out is to think for yourself. How to be wise, to understand the futility of all this. What difference does it make if I drive in a Honda City or a Mercedes? Because after a few rides,
both feel the same.
Exactly. The experience in the Mercedes is the same as in the Honda City. But you have to earn that much more for all of this. So when you understand this, you kind of withdraw and say, I don't have to live up to other people's expectations. I live with my own terms. That is a big learning. And then when you have the time and your mental space to focus on more meaningful things, you do that. You become renounced from the world, and that mind is now available for meditation. And as you meditate and you're deep in meditation, the last thought, when you stop the chant, the last thought goes away. The mind gets extinct. The intellect, which before this was always discriminating between two things, now is left with only one, silence. So it's perplexed, it's bewildered, and the intellect is the last equipment to go. And then you take off. It's like a rocket taking off into the realm of the transcendental. It's a beautiful sequence of thought.
Yeah, that's great. I think a lot for us to digest, reflect on, and I'm sure we have enough homework for the week ahead. Shall we close with our
Sure.
invocation?
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this week again. As we mentioned at the start of the show, do keep in mind that there's a spiritual retreat coming up with Jayaji on the 28th and 29th of March. So if you are interested, please do get in touch with us via the website, WhatsApp, whatever works for you. And, we hope that you've enjoyed today's show and you've learned, you've gleaned some lessons from it. And have a great week ahead. We'll see you soon. And a very happy Gudi Padwa to all of you and your families. Have a wonderful festive week ahead.